Good morning and welcome to the Sports Carnival, broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios. Now for the guy who knows too much TLC can lead to STDs, just FYI. Now here's your host, Dave Kearney.
Yeah, well, truer words never spoken right there, my friend Chad. The three-letter acronyms that basically rule us all: STD, TMI, FYI, NFL, NBA, MLB. We'll cover at least a couple of these. How you feeling this morning, big guy? What's the weather like out there in eastern to slash western Washington? You're kind of sitting right there in the middle. How is it out there today?
No snow, so that's good. 25 degrees, not bad.
So it's minus 25 degrees right now.
Nice. Where you're
Not
at?
really. Yeah, minus 25. It says that it's like minus 10, but the real feel is minus 23 degrees right now. It is cold as the dickens. And if you're listening to us in Western Wisconsin, you know exactly what I'm talking about. P1 Breacher chiming in here, probably from the farm and or from Norwin up there in Galesville, Trempealeau area, said it's fucking cold. Yeah, this is the kind of brutal cold, Chad, that you really only get in a few places. Canada, right? The Antarctic, possibly the North Pole, don't know. But this kind of cold, it just gets right into your bones. There's really nothing you can do to escape it. It's that cold. There's just no way to hide. Sitting by these windows, bundled up, I've got a heating pad on my ass and a little heater down below. It's almost like I was at the hockey team again.
Well, one way to get over that is to set a fire. It looks like, Thomas, there was a fire alarm in his residence hall. He believes it was a kitchen fire. Maybe it was that goddamn squirrel. You think that might be the case there, Thomas?
Well, it's interesting because that's exactly what Rob Dog was saying. It was Revenge of the Squirrels. Yeah. And you know what? That's a really, really smart take. As a matter of fact, I think that right now, university investigators are digging into the squirrel mania that has led to a possible pulling of that fire alarm. Guys, Brad from Green Bay says it's also cold in eastern Wisconsin. So apparently we're just cold from each side of the state and probably from like each side of the country. I mean, I'm looking at some of these weather maps. It looks like it's just cold everywhere right now.
Well, it was interesting. It's like it was on Sunday. It was like in the 50s here. It was beautiful.
Really?
And yesterday it was like 9 degrees in the morning and, got to a high of 30. So today, so all week it's going to be cold. So everywhere, I think it's a cold snap just about everywhere. But man, there for like one or 2 days, it was like springtime.
That's the kind of shit that really gets you that gets you depressed, because for those in Wisconsin, we feel the same way. You go through January and you're thinking, we're sitting on easy street here, baby. This has been awesome. 32 degrees, no problem. Let's go out and do some yard games when it's 32 degrees. Then February starts off and it's not even February yet. And it's just starting off with a real thud. So don't mean to bum you out. It's cold as shit. What are we going to do? We're inside right now, or at least I hope you're inside. Chad, I've got a really interesting question that I want to pose to you this morning, because this is starting to trend so high across all the different social media platforms, which, by the way, if you follow us, it's at The Sports Carney. That's at YouTube, at Twitch, at Twitter, at LinkedIn, all the different places at The Sports Carney. I'm seeing the narrative that you've been basically building and constructing all season long start to really take shape, and not just take shape, but like go viral. Hashtag the NFL is rigged, or hashtag NFL rigged, was just exploding after the Kansas City Cincinnati game. Barstool was doing a great piece on this yesterday, talking about Patrick Mahomes, the State Farm representative, going to play a Super Bowl at State Farm Stadium down in Arizona. Coincidence? I think not. So listen, the question that I've got for listeners, for audience members, for you, and for Matt Janus, who will join us at 8:30 this morning, is this: do you think the NFL is rigged? And the way that you can answer this question, there's 3 different ways. You can say no way, maybe a little, or yes, it's totally rigged. So take this morning's poll question on our Facebook group page, which, as I mentioned, continues to grow. Thank you for the support. Or our Twitter feed, I should say, at The Sports Carney, because I want to take the temperature of you guys. This thing is starting to really catch some actual viral nature to it. I don't know exactly why, or if this is the first time it's done it. It's the first time that I've really paid attention to it being rigged and how much that stuff starts to trend. So maybe I'm just looking at it in a vacuum. But Chad, let's just start off with you. What do you think? Yes, a little bit, totally rigged, or no way?
Well, this is where I think people get bent on this is they don't really understand what that means. Well, what do you mean by rigged? Well, there's a couple of different variations or possibilities there. That the whole entire thing is scripted? No, of course not. Not every single action is scripted. It doesn't work that way, obviously. But I do think that there is narrative building that happens. I think that's clear, and something I can cite different sport, but I think it follows this line of thinking is in winning time when they had to decide who the MVP was going to be, and it should have been Kareem, and they all admitted it should have been Kareem. It ended up going to Magic Johnson. Why? Because they were narrative building. They knew that he was the future. They understood his personality. They knew that they needed him to be out front to be able to take the league to another place. So I think those are the kinds of things that happen. I do think that there probably is manipulations that happen, and they're small ones. I don't think it's not completely WWE, but I do think there's a degree to that. I think we're being naive if we don't believe the amount of money that is involved in this, that there isn't a little bit of manipulation, especially when you look at how their charter is written and that they are entertainment. That's something you have to keep in mind.
This is definitely an entertainment business, and I've asked this question so many times of different people and in different circumstances, but we'll continue to ask it today because I think it fits with this. Does life imitate art, or does art imitate life? When we say it's scripted, how much of our regular lives are scripted in such a degree where the pieces are put in place, and then based upon those particular pieces being put in place, we follow scripted narratives? This goes back to the way that we were raised, the parts of the country in which we were raised, or the world. There's all sorts of narratives that get built. I'm really curious to see what your thoughts are on this, though. Go to our Facebook group page or our Twitter feed and just answer the question. Is the NFL #NFL rigged? Let's step aside really quick. Say what's up to our friends at the Recovery Room. Had a hell of a night playing some bingo last night. That was fun. And we'll come back 8:30 this morning. Matt Janus jumps aboard the Sports Carnival Carousel. We're broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios powered by the Recovery Room. What can I say? The Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi Street is not only my favorite bar in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin, it's my favorite restaurant in all of downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin. Breakfast served 8 to noon, Saturday and Sundays, daily specials, incredible cocktails, and the best damn wait staff in the entire city. My buddy Matt knows how to treat you right, and that's why when you go to the Recovery Room on 7th and Mississippi, you're always going to have a great time and a great meal with a great cocktail. So if you haven't been in a while, or perhaps you're just regular and you want to stop in again, make it a thing. I'm there every single week. How about you?
The Social Distancing Sport Association, or SDSA, presents guidelines to safer athletics. For example, when participating in basketball, remember the Harden rule. That's right, James Harden is a man ahead of his time. Number 1, when playing defense, that is if you choose to, keep 3 to 6 feet between you and your opponent. Never double team and always appear disengaged or aloof. On offense, be sure to isolate yourself from your teammates. Dribble the shot clock down, rarely pass, and finally take a 30 to 35-foot shot. This has been brought to you by Arm's Length Under Armour. Go ahead and play. Just stay at least an arm's length away.
Broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios, this is the Sports Carnival. Life is like toilet paper. You're either on a roll or you're taking shit for some asshole. Now here's your host, Dave Carney.
I just love you, man. I just love you so much. I tell you, that Harden's rules piece that we just actually showed to our audience members, if you're listening to it, you got to hear it, is actually awarded right behind me. You can see where my finger is pointing to this nice award from the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association's Awards for Excellence Gala a couple of years ago. Chad, well played on writing and producing that bad boy, because that won the number one best humorous commercial in the state of Wisconsin. Bam, it's the SDSA, the Social Distancing Sport Association, the Harden rules. Well played, my friend. You did a great job on that and all that stuff. So we appreciate Chad and all of his contributions there, especially when it comes to that kind of funny shit. If you want to join us here, I know Rob Dog's checking in. Hit us up on our Facebook group page. That's a great way to do so. Or YouTube. Twitch also lets us see your comments. We don't get comments from Twitter, and LinkedIn's basically just up there for a reason that I'm not even entirely sure of. There's maybe 2 or 3 people. John Denton this morning could be watching us on LinkedIn, as he is like fully ensconced in the world of business and business only. But Rob Dog, as mentioned, checks in here. He's like, I'm pretty sure giving the Chiefs that extra 3rd down and giving them a 1st down after Mahomes was sacked tells us everything. And if you're just jumping onto the program now, we're talking about the NFL and whether or not this shit is rigged. So all season long, Chad has been telling us, and I think partly tongue-in-cheek, The NFL is rigged. This thing's scripted. They're making the narratives because they want to see certain things transpire. They want to promote certain stars. Well, this is something that now is starting to catch like major national sort of attention as far as a viral sensation will go. All over Twitter, all over Barstool, all over Instagram, everywhere I'm looking yesterday, Chad, on our social media feeds, I'm seeing different people put up certain questions or ask these questions. Is the NFL rigged? And I go back to what you mentioned about winning time. The NBA in 1980 was at a complete standstill. I mean, the idea of basketball becoming NBA basketball as popular as it is right now was in nobody's mind, right? It was in nobody's mind that it could be that good. They had hoped, David Stern, this was funny, that it could be as popular as tennis. Okay, seriously, that was part of the show. As popular as tennis. Well, we know that basketball is probably the second most popular sport worldwide now, behind soccer, right? When you think about the countries that play it, it's probably the second most played sport in the world behind soccer. That said, you talked about a narrative in which Kareem against the Sixers was undoubtedly the MVP that season, but got injured before Game 7. Magic goes and plays center, scores 42, get 15 rebounds, 7 assists. It was a great performance, like an all-time performance from a rookie. But Kareem was still the MVP of the series. They give it to Magic because they want to promote Magic Johnson, because they know what Magic Johnson's going to be able to do for the NBA, that, let's just face it, people still weren't bought on or sold on, a guy that used to be Lou Alcindor, who changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, being the face of the NBA. That's part of it, Chad, right? There still existed that reticence to give over to this societal change that Kareem was a big part of, right? Much like Muhammad Ali in boxing. So they put Magic Johnson as MVP to create a narrative. Now, did that get the Lakers to 8 championships in his, run in the 80s? No. But that was something that helped spur the Lakers and spur the league into a position in which now you can actually see complete narrative building in the NBA as far as who they promote, what stars, where they'd like to see players play. For the NFL, I think it's even easier because these guys are basically crash test dummies. When you really break it down, all you have to do is set the parameters in such a way, incentivize teams to do certain things, and hope that smart people go and buy those particular teams, and the dominoes fall into place. Look at who's representing the Super Bowl, a historic team, the first Super Bowl representative from the AFC, and you've got a team in Philadelphia who's making its second Super Bowl in 5 years? And this is one of the major markets in the country. This couldn't have worked out any better for the NFL.
Well, and the hard part is proving it, right? And that's what people will say. Well, what's your proof? Do you have any proof? And it's almost impossible because it's very subjective on how it's being done, clearly. But there are people that have been in the league or were in the league that do testify to this, that there is some staging that is involved in games. And Larry Johnson comes to mind, who was a former Chief, running back for the Chiefs, was a great running back, and he's very outspoken and has talked about. There's other people that have written books. Now, the one thing that you'll notice about them is you'll never see them on any of the mainstream sports channels because they're all marginalized. They can't have that they don't even want that discussed. They don't even give any credibility to it whatsoever, obviously, and we know why. But when you think about it, doesn't it kind of make sense why the league would want certain teams playing in certain games, TV revenue, ad revenue, all of those different things. And then the other thing is, they want a trajectory of the league and who represents having certain stars doing better than others. And clearly you can't script all of it. The player still has to go out there and perform, and things happen clearly. But, one thing that comes to mind for people here in the Northwest is you have perhaps one of, if not the greatest running back in the league at the time. You're at the goal line. You decide to throw the football. You get an interception, and Tom Brady wins another Super Bowl. Yeah. That didn't seem scripted. That didn't seem like that was illogical at all, especially when Pete Carroll is supposed to be one of the greatest coaches as well. That doesn't really wash well with a lot of people. When you see those kinds of things, naturally, your mind's going to go that direction. Now, is there any credibility to any of that? Can you prove it? Not necessarily, but it does make you kind of scratch your head, similar to what happened with with Bengals fans, watching the Chiefs get that extra third down and some of those calls that were made. I don't see how you can't go down that road. Again, it's subjective, and you can disagree. That's fine. But it does seem a little bit odd.
Well, it seems odd in a lot of ways when you think about who the NFL would like to see there in these certain kinds of situations. And I think that you could look at this matchup and see the first black Super Bowl quarterback matchup ever. This is the first time that's ever happened, where you've had 2 starting quarterbacks from each team be black. This is something that we've never seen. This is a great moment in time for that, right? But Joe V says the marginalized people are marginalized because they're nuts. And the NFL would have preferred Brady or Rodgers. I don't know about that because Brady or Rodgers satisfy a certain generation, like ours, right, guys? Like if you're 40 or over, maybe Rodgers and Brady feels like the right matchup. But if you're under 40, why wouldn't Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes be the better matchup? These guys have a lot more juice left to squeeze out of them, right? Brady and Rodgers are essentially gasping for their last breaths. And Tom Brady may play another season. He just finished his 23rd. Aaron Rodgers may go follow Brett Favre's footsteps and play in New York for the Jets. We'll see. But I don't know that they would have preferred that. I see what you're saying. And Chad, I see what you're saying as well. So, Joe, I see that when you say they're marginalized because they're nuts, in many cases, that stuff can come off as super fucking crazy. But, Chad, I see what you're saying, too. I think it's like this. When you look at any sort of entertainment property, and this can be Hollywood, this can be, the NFL, the NBA. I mean, heck, we could take it if we really wanted to get into fixing shit to FIFA, right? Which is still a sport in which players have to play, but certain things are set up in a way that it makes it not illogical if it goes counter to the narrative, but surprising, which is when we get the Cinderella stories and these upsets, right? Who generally wins a college basketball March tournament? Chalk. It might not all go to chalk when you start to look at the Final Four, but who generally wins those things? Chalk. Even Gonzaga hasn't won a national championship yet, and they put 60 guys in the NBA in the last couple of years. There's different ways that you can set parameters in which it favors the teams that do one of a number of things correctly to make the predicted outcome seem more predictable. And this is how betting folks in Vegas have ways of building metrics, right? Because you can take historical precedents and build it forward. You can't do that if it's completely random. There are certain things that you can sort of count on. Now, back to the players, and we talked about this last night or yesterday at the recovery room, as a matter of fact, before we were getting ready for some bingo. The players still have to make the plays, and they're not the ones, I don't believe, that are in any way, shape, or form scripting any of this. The coaches, I don't believe, are involved in any of that. This comes from a larger viewpoint, ownership, possibly general managers. I do believe, like, look at what Howie Roseman did for the Eagles. Doug Peterson gets fired for playing Jalen Hurts instead of Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is going to be out of the fucking league, and Jalen Hurts is going to be the MVP, right? Or at least close there to it. But that was something that was trying to be built. And you and I, we watched that Seattle game go up in flames against the Patriots at Jerry's Nugget. We were going to win some serious money on that thing. Like, we were going to cash in really big. And when he doesn't run the football, I remember you and I don't know if I've been more upset about a bad beat in my life than that one, because it just seemed so stupid. I mean,
it was stupid.
It was stupid.
Yeah.
So I thought the narrative, though, that was trying to be built at that time was Russell Wilson was going to be an elite quarterback. And Pete Carroll wanted to make that happen.
Right.
And if he throws that touchdown and wins that second Super Bowl, that's the narrative, that Russell Wilson is one of those all-time elite great quarterbacks, which he still may be. But I don't know. I can see what people in Seattle are thinking. I really can. It's probably why it's so sleepless.
Yes. Well, there's a guy named Jerry Rice. Have you heard of him before?
I've a couple of times. Yeah. His son was a not good receiver at UNLV.
He's been pretty outspoken about the Super Bowl when he played with the Raiders, about it being rigged. That he thought there were, and I can't remember specifically what it was, but I do recollect that, which is surprising. A guy like Jerry Rice, obviously, with as much weight as he carries in the NFL, obviously one of the greatest, not the greatest wide receiver, but maybe the greatest player of all time, coming out and obviously that is specific to him, and he thinks that they were robbed and all those kinds of things. So you can make the argument. But here's the thing about, and I love how everybody says this. When somebody goes counter to the mainstream narrative, and this doesn't matter what it is, automatically, what do? You attack them and tell them they're crazy. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a possibility, but think about why somebody would subject themselves to that. And then everybody else that counters the other side, that goes on the mainstream to counter that opposing opinion. But by the way, most people that are on television, I don't know if people know this, they get paid. Did you know that?
Yeah.
When we have guests on, they're not paid. When people on the news, when people on sports channels, they're getting paid money. Okay. Generally speaking, you don't bite the hand that feeds you. Why would you go against? Why would a guy like Larry Johnson go up against the NFL? Do you think that that's going to help his future? Do you think he's going to end up getting a job or more opportunities or more revenue or any of those kinds of things by having that kind. That doesn't make him right. That doesn't make him automatically correct. But think about that. So that is your two choices. Well, either he's crazy or there's something to it. I tend to believe that there is more to it. And as we see in the world, and I won't get into specifics, as we see in the world currently, there are certain narratives that at one time everybody said are crazy. You're stupid. Oh my God, you're a conspiracy theorist. And now more and more people that were saying those kinds of things are looking like they're right. And so now what do? That you have a problem, because now you have cognitive dissonance, right? You're holding two different opinions at the same time. It becomes very confusing. I will just tell you this, moving forward as we go through this in the next couple of years, it's only going to get crazier. And those people that you call conspiracy theorists and marginalize you're going to start looking to them going, hey, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? Oh my God, can you believe this? Can you believe that? Believe me, it's coming, and it's happening very, very rapidly. And that includes sports, because most of everything you think is real, everything that you've been taught is bullshit for the most part, in one degree or another.
Well, I was just hoping that Joe V would be right, because if the stupider we are, the more clicks we get, then this thing's going to definitely take off. Because if I'm making stupid point after stupid point, then hopefully this is going to get us somewhere. Listen, I think
that's because it's making somebody uncomfortable. And when people have conversations that people get uncomfortable, it's real easy. All you have to do is click off. You don't have to watch. You don't have to listen. But when it challenges you, when you get challenged, especially when those feelings and those thoughts you've had forever and ever gets challenged, this is what happens. You get mad, and then you have to bark at somebody. You have to call somebody a name. You have to go ad hominem. That's exactly what everybody does. You name call because you can't counter it. And again, you have cognitive dissonance, and it's very difficult to deal with.
Let me tell you what, you're getting a nice camp, though, around you on our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney. When asked that question, is the NFL rigged? 63, nearly 64% say yes, it's totally rigged. No way, and maybe a little tied with 18.2%. Looking at our Facebook group page here, Chad, we've got 58% of respondents so far saying, yeah, maybe a little bit. 28% are saying it's totally rigged. Only 14% of respondents are saying, no way, this thing is not rigged. Look, just because one thing can be kind of true doesn't mean that all things that you might think are crazy, Jovi, are in the same boat, right? Like, that's not the way that it is. I look at the NFL and the NBA and just all of sports as a complete and utter entertainment product that does have elements of instantaneousness. It has elements of surprise. It has elements of action that we don't get from any other property in entertainment, which is why, if we think about this, the NFL is the #1 TV program in the country. Every single week, the NFL gets a higher rating than every other television show that's on television. That's why. The NFL also used to create basically hallowed ground on Sunday. They wanted to be also part of what you thought of when you thought of your day of Sabbath rest, right? And I know that Sabbath is actually for Saturday, but you get it. We celebrate the Sunday here. So the NFL used to consecrate their day with being on Sunday. There's a way that builds into your mind so that you can overcome certain elements of what would be possibly perceived as collusion. So I don't know about necessarily script writing at all times, but think about the end of last season, guys and gals, when the Raiders and I want to say the Steelers were basically tied. Who was going to go into the playoffs? If there was a tie with the Raiders and the Chargers, then I believe the Steelers get into the postseason. If the Raiders win the game, they get into the postseason. The point that I'm trying to make here is this, and we talked about this on the old show. There was actually talk amongst people in the media, NFL circles, and from what I understand, even in the NFL, about whether the Raiders and the Chargers should tie, because I think they both got into the postseason. I can't remember the wonkiness of it, but I was absolutely fucking furious about the idea that would be something that would be discussed, because this is the other part that for me becomes very important. And one of our partners is BetUS. Okay. Go to betus.com, get that free money, use promo code Carnival. Okay. The reason that you bet on games, Chad, is because apparently you can trust the integrity of the matchup. When you have the idea, even the outside idea, that there's potential collusion between teams, that upsets the entire narrative that there is integrity in the game. Because if that's a thought that gets tossed around under any circumstance, right? Like under any circumstance, then you have to start really questioning the legitimacy of the sport as far as its integrity. That's why, for me, I had to cry foul on that so loud, Because how can you make wagers on a game if there's even a remote possibility that two fucking coaches got together before a game and said, listen, we're going to tie. And you know what? Damn it, that game nearly ended in a tie. It nearly ended in a tie. The Raiders kick a field goal. They win. It was the craziest thing, but it was discussed. And Chad, that for me, that was enough to trip my trigger to say, they might not have this thing like written down on a notepad and decided exactly how this is going or put into a treatment, if you will, as far as a script goes. But damn it, they surely do seem in certain cases to want to set up the dominoes just so that when you flick them, they fall exactly where they are wanted to go.
Yeah. And again, I don't think that every move, every play, I'm not saying that, but I do think there are moments that there's probably calls that are made. And, again, I go back to how did the NFL start? Who started the NFL? This is why I always thought it was humorous that anybody objected in the NFL when they were on TV. Prior, a couple of years ago, they still were doing this about gambling and how bad gambling was. I'm like, the goddamn NFL was started by the mob. It all started about gambling. The whole thing was invented. It's all about gambling.
Yes.
Period. End of story. And I know this is hard to believe, but people in the mob don't necessarily have integrity. I don't know if you guys knew that. And guess who else is an extension of the mob? Yeah, it's called your government. Most people in government have mob mentality, and all they care about is themselves. They pretend like they care about you, but they don't. They care about themselves, and they can tell they care about their future, positions and benefiting themselves. They don't care about you. And do you think anybody in the NFL cares about you? And the great thing about if you rig a gambling situation, yeah, some people are going to be pissed at you if they find out, but the other people that won don't care that it was rigged. All they care is that they won. I mean, think about that.
Yeah, well, listen, the mob, George Halas, what are you talking about? I mean, that's not a thing. The Chicago Bears, you're talking completely crazy. Listen, gambling rules sports, and it always has. I just think that when you really break down how the sport is now monetized, there are so many different incentives, not necessarily like you say to script it out play by play, because you can't do that. The players have to make it a thing. But why you'd be incentivized, Chad, to have certain things work out in the way that would most benefit the greater whole. Here's something else to sort of peel back, because now I see that Rob Dog from Stotter's checking in. This is great. Chad for POTUS 2024. I don't know if he's got enough time to fundraise here, guys. We'll give him a pause on this cycle. Maybe next one, Chad.
Yeah. No, thank you.
If the NFL was completely unrigged, okay, and noodle me this, because Joe V, he's an attorney and he's a real smart guy. So noodle me this, Joe. If the NFL is totally unrigged, which I don't know that Joe's saying either, but if the NFL is totally unrigged, why do they go out of their way to protect this guy, Dan Snyder? What does he have on them? Because what we were sort of told and what was leaked out, and we talked about this several months back, that Dan Snyder had copious amounts of information, probably derogatory or inflammatory information against other owners in the NFL. Surprising. Dan Snyder's going through a congressional investigation, being charged of like horrible workplace misconduct, is probably got a fucking, racketeering charge coming against him because there is thoughts that he stole money from the NFL. But it's interesting that he's not getting pushed out by anybody. I have not heard any of these owners really come out, maybe Shad Khan, maybe, and say, we want this guy out. And if that does tell us anything, it tells us that at least, and here's what I guess we can go to, because this has always been a thing in sports, at least there is a clandestine nature to the ownership of the teams, right? The Yankees back in the day used to basically fucking force teams away from free agent. They would scare teams. They were enforcers of certain kinds of rules of baseball. They had a position. They didn't want to give it up, and they made damn sure that they were going to keep their position. That's, I think, where we can go as a baseline. There is at least some clandestine nature between owners, because these are 32 of the richest people in the world, not just a store owner anymore.
Right.
This isn't what it was back in the old days. This is 32 of the richest people in the world whose business interests are complex and varied. And sometimes, like Woody Johnson from the Jets, wasn't he an ambassador, for Christ's sakes, under President Trump? I think he was. There's some coordination in some way, shape, or form.
Of Commanders, my understanding is Jeff Bezos is possibly going to purchase the team. That was the latest that I saw, or at least I saw an article. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But I do think that's going down that direction. I think Dan Snyder will be out at some point, and a guy like Jeff Bezos is probably a likely candidate to not only be able to purchase them, but wants to purchase them, which I find interesting because everybody would get free shipping if you're a Commander fan. So that's nice.
That would be great. All right, dude. let's step aside. This conversation's all sorts of fun. And if you want to join the Sports Carnival's poll question this morning, jump aboard our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney, our Facebook group page, if you are a member, and just answer this. Do you think the NFL is rigged? There's 3 ways that you can answer. We'll be back with UWL head football coach, totally not rigged in D3 WIAC play, Matt Janus. Stay tuned.
Preferred Insurance is the official auto, home, business, flood, and life insurance agency of the Sports Carnival, serving folks in La Crosse and surrounding areas with licenses in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. As an independent insurance agency, Preferred Insurance is free to find the very best insurance for you, your family, or your business needs. Call my friends at Preferred Insurance today and set up a free consultation. Remember, working with an independent agency means Preferred Insurance works for you, with you, to find the best solutions at the best prices.
Back to the Sports Carnival, broadcasting live from the Trauma Center studios. So many freaks, so few circuses. Now here's your host, Dave Carney, the leader of the circus.
I was going to say that's why we created the Sports Carnival, because we figured a circus wasn't inclusive enough. And mostly carnivals, guys and gals, are just fun and games. There are occasions in which the wheels fall off. And if you're amongst those that feel like they've fallen off this morning, welcome aboard. By the way, take this morning's poll question at the Sports Carney on our Twitter feed. If you're a Facebook group member, Chad, nearly 340 members now this morning. You can answer this question after the AFC Championship game. And I saw this all over social media yesterday. NFL fans are asking if the NFL is rigged. What do you think? We're having some fun with this, but there's 3 ways that you can answer. No way, maybe a little, or yes, totally rigged. Again, on our Twitter feed at the Sports Carney, 61.5% of respondents are still saying, yeah, it's totally rigged. Matt Janus is a UWL football guy, head coach of the year in the WIAC, a Bears fan, and somebody who I would believe thinks the NFL is not rigged. Matt, you've been around the NFL enough. You've gone to Detroit's camps. You've been to the, just a ton of different NFL type of settings. The NFL, in your opinion, isn't rigged, right? Like, this is not a scripted thing.
Well, can I say yes? Mainly because I hate the 2 teams that are going to the Super Bowl. I say yes because I hate the Chiefs and because I hate the Eagles. And I sat all day Sunday on my couch complaining about the officiating and all that stuff. Can I say yes to that question?
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I'm saying yes to yes here in 2023.
Yeah, I like I said, I don't think it is, but I just hate the Eagles and I hate the Chiefs and I can't stand them. And I hate the Eagles fans. I hate everything about Philadelphia. So I just complained the whole weekend or the whole day Sunday.
Well, I was getting bad beat.
That's great.
I was getting bad beat on Sunday night, guys. And listen, I tried my hardest to not come in here yesterday and just throw up my hands and be, one of those betting fans and football fans that says, well, the referees totally stole the game. But Matt, let's face facts, and you have to deal with this in your level too. When the referee becomes the story of the game, and it was kind of the story of the game in the Chiefs-Bengals game, a little bit less in the Eagles game because they got out of hand so quickly. But when the referee is the story of the game, that's a fail for the game, is it not?
Yeah, I just think that just kind of stinks. I mean, and I just wasn't good, and I think just like you said, it becomes like the highlight of the weekend. That's what everybody's talking about, really, in both of these games. And the late hit was a late hit, and to me, it's more about the consistency in the calls, right? In that the calls have changed from the regular season, right, to the first couple rounds of the playoffs game. It was let's play. Right, we didn't talk one bit about the officials to now. These 2 games this weekend, it felt like the amount of calls were just ridiculous, right? I mean, I'll say the Eagles and the 49ers game. Obviously, there's a few calls and there's more to it, but I thought the call on Ward, right, on AJ Brown, the pass interference call on what was it, 3rd or 4th down, like I didn't view that as that. I think the running into the kicker that they got, although the game was over, right, not a hand, I thought that was a hold on the Eagles, if anything, or if anything, you were going to say he got blocked into the punter. So, I think some of that, and then obviously the Chiefs, the holes, the consistency on when it was a hold, probably a block in the back on the return, the mess on the play clock just sticks out, even though they're trying to, call it off and they're trying to wave it off, but they get that thing on the clock, and the very next play they call defensive pass interference. I mean, again, was it the main reason that team's lost? But it just kind of stinks when you come out of that weekend, you got two teams going, to the Super Bowl, but that's the majority of what people are talking about is the officiating, and that's what kind of stinks.
Yeah, and that's why the question, is the NFL rigged, is something that's trending right now more than I've seen it. And it's so funny because we started off the season and Chad was just sort of toying with this. And I think that our audience members, Matt, got into, some of the playfulness. But seriously, you start to ask questions more and more when it seems so egregious. And this is one thing that, when I watch high school sports, when I watch college sports, and, then I start to watch the NFL, I start to get less and less forgiving of the officials. At a certain level, I can forgive certain mistakes, right? Because you're in high school, you're in, a high school gymnasium, you're not going to get 100% of the calls, right? But generally, I think officials do a really good job, and they're in that range, 95 to 98% correct. But when you start to see some of the absolute just dumbfounding misses by the officials, and for the Bengals, this is where I felt bad for them. It wasn't just the calls that they got against them, guys. It was the calls that they didn't get at all for them. That punt return, dudes are getting blocked in the back every which way but loose. I mean, they're just getting strewn all over the field. When finally Asai ends up chasing Patrick Mahomes out of bounds, it's only because Kansas City was holding for about 58 seconds. I mean, they were playing wrestling, WWE, nothing to see here. And there's really little to nothing a football player can do. The kick that you mentioned, in which, at the end of that Philly-San Francisco game, I don't know what more that guy could have done to try to tuck and roll out of the way of touching that guy. I really don't. He went into a full stop, drop, and roll like he was on fire so that he didn't hit anything. It just so happened it was football, and he got launched into a kicker. So, I don't believe that it's necessarily word for word scripted, but it sure seems like narratives are pushed into a certain direction. This is a hard left turn in a way, but do you think the WIAC does that with like Whitewater? Because I looked at their roster against our UW team last week, Coach, when they played basketball at Mitchell Hall, and there was like a 7-footer that got no burn. I mean, on Whitewater, I'm like, they've got a 7-foot guy on the team that got no minutes, and I'm thinking, how many of these are spread around the WIAC? Because that feels like some sort of collusion.
No, I don't. I think, we got a pretty good crew. And I think even today, just in general, reffing, umpiring, that's really hard stuff. And I think if you look from the high school level to the college level, I mean, there is a severe shortage of that. And, I think obviously technology has changed quite a bit of it, where now everything's under scrutiny, and everything, has 20 different angles that you can look at. So, it makes it hard at times. But no, not in our league. I think we got a great set of officials that, really do it for the love of the game, right? They officiate at our level because they love college football. They love getting a chance to do it on Saturdays. I mean, you go so much into it, like, and we were talking in a head coach meeting with our commissioner, and, just about the process of what those guys have. That's an all day. They are giving up an entire Saturday to ref our games, because they have to travel to wherever they're going. So that's 2 to 4 hours right there. They got to be there 3 hours before our game starts, and then obviously the whole entire game, and then getting home. And these guys at our level dedicate really their whole Saturday, not for the paycheck. They're not making a living off of reffing our conference games, but to be able to kind of see how cool it is, especially as you've gotten, some of the officials have been reffing in our league since when I played in our league. So you just kind of, them, and they're just kind of a piece of what makes the WIAC so special.
Yeah, don't you get a kind of a feel for a game? Because, obviously you have the book's interpretation of how it's supposed to be called. And then you get into a game, and a certain set of ref calls it a certain way. So in other words, you could pretty much call holding in the NFL almost on every play. Let's be honest, right? Mm-hmm. There's a certain amount you can get away with. And I think that's what you were talking about, Coach, and I agree with. The consistency, specifically in that Chiefs game, seemed a little bit off. It seemed lopsided. And I think this is where people start to think, well, is it rigged because of that? It's one thing to call it as long as you're calling it both ways. Like, not that it's necessarily a hold by the book, but that's how they've been calling a hold throughout the game. But when you call it on one side but don't call it on the other, people start to scratch their heads. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm a defensive guy, Chad, so I'm with you, right? So no matter what, the offensive line is always holding, right? So I mean, you'll see me at every game. Anytime a running back goes for more than 5 yards against us, I will probably yell holding. You know, like so I just think that's part of it. But I think, like I said, it comes down to consistency and how they've changed it kind of from like the week to week, right? So it's hard to get into that groove of what are you going to call it. There's some blatant ones like I think I do. I think that late hit out of bounds, I mean, that's going to get called. It just is. And it's I don't think it's the defender's fault. He's busting his butt. Like, that's going to get called. I think, the hands to the face in the Eagles game is going to get called. But, I would agree with you. The consistency and the holding, I think special team stuff, especially those blocks, like that's pretty easy to see at the point of attack. And some of that stuff's pretty easy to see. So you question, like, well, why aren't we throwing the flag on that? And if you guys remember how the league works, they don't really want kickoffs. They don't really want returns. So they call a holding on almost every kickoff or punt anyway. So to not do it in this game, and especially on that play, is kind of a little questionable.
So let me ask you this, Coach, because the players, when you lose a game, the players, they take it obviously really personal, but they're players and they've been out there, just banging each other against a wall essentially for 3 hours, and maybe they can get over a loss like this easier. I don't know, than a coach. Maybe a coach gets over it easier. You tell me, when you lose a game like, say, the Bengals lost, I know that the 49ers didn't even really feel like it was much of a fair fight after Purdy got hurt, but you lose a game like you do if you're the Bengals and you're Zach Taylor and you're his coaching staff. How long does it take you to rebound from that?
A long time. It does. Like I'll be honest, I still haven't watched our Wartburg game yet.
Is that right?
I'm going to, and I think I told you guys that I still haven't watched it. It's still, especially in that kind with the team that they have and the team that we had. It's just hard to turn that on again. It's hard to watch that because you're going to get angry, you're going to get frustrated, you're going to say, I should have done this, should have done that, and I think you look at the Eagles and the 49ers game, right? It comes down to 3 plays, really, right? It comes down to the Smith reception all the way in the first quarter, right? And so if you're Kyle Shanahan, I'm sure he's killing himself for not reviewing that, for not throwing the flag in the challenge flag, right? And I know he says, well, I didn't have the angle, and rightfully so, right? Fox didn't show the viewers its angle until feels like the second play, and then you're like, oh my God, he dropped it. It was an incomplete pass. But in that type of situation, no matter what, in the first half, you burn your timeouts. You don't need to save those things. And especially with the 49ers, right? You have to play with the lead. Like, you can't get behind with that team. And then, you talk about the second play, you already talked about it, was Purdy getting hurt. And, you got a second string tight end match one-on-one. And, but that's his scheme, right? It's play action. He was hoping that Samuel was going to pull with the motion, pull Reddick out of it, and he didn't. And so obviously Purdy gets hurt, and then you're on your backup quarterback. And do you think Josh Johnson had any reps this week?
No,
there's no way with the rookie quarterback, right? Like, it's not like they went, oh, Josh, you go get your reps. I mean, Brock Purdy's still a rookie quarterback playing in his 14th game. So he took probably every single rep. So when Purdy goes down, you have like 10 plays left for Johnson, right? Like, you can't run the same game plan. Yeah. Like, it's completely ripped off. So that's the second play. And then the third play, like I said, was the kind of the whole series of that killer drive. In a lot of the times I talked to you before about like that middle 8, right? The last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half can decide a game. And that's what the Eagles did then. They go on a 12-play killer drive at the end of it and go up 14-7, and that's the stab. And then they get the ball back, and then they score 21-7. That's the twist. The game's over at that point. So I think in a lot of this stuff, it comes down to, certain things as a coach that you wish you would have done. I'm sure Kyle Shanahan's thinking, man, I wish I would have challenge that. Man, I wish I would have changed that protection or realized that, and so that stuff's the stuff that eats you as a coach. And it's hard to digest that. And for guys in the NFL, and you don't look at Dan Marino, he goes to Super Bowl early in his career. You don't just get those opportunities year in and year out. And the same thing with the NFL, like in every football team, right? It's every year is different. Like, my team is now going to be way different than what we were last year because we lost 20 seniors, right? And so there's new faces that come in, and it's not just guaranteed, oh, we have Joe Burrow that we're just going to get to the AFC Championship every year. And, especially if you look at that Bengals game, right? Like, it's 2020 and you have two chances. 2020, it scores 20-20, and you had two chances with the ball to go on a drive and to get points, and you failed. Like that stuff eats you alive as a coach, and it'll eat them alive for a long time here, and until you get to next season almost.
So it might even be like this, guys. They might not even watch that tape until they go back to training camp, because that might be one of those situations where you're like, no, we know what happened inside. We'll wait to see this again.
Vacation time.
Yeah, when we bring back our team. Now, fellas, before we wrap up today, because Matt will have you back next Tuesday, Super Bowl is not this weekend. We get the first competitive flag football game in Pro Bowl history. I'm kind of excited about that. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be better than non-tackling. Let me ask you both, and Chad, I want to start with you, because we talked about Brock Purdy. It was confirmed yesterday, UCL. This is Tommy John surgery time, right? Yeah. So he's having Tommy John surgery, minimum 6 months before he throws. Do you think San Francisco stays with Purdy, they go with Trey Lance, or another direction? What do you think?
I think they're going to stick with Trey Lance, would be my guess. And Purdy will end up being their backup, and then maybe they deal him later.
Okay. Coach, what do you say? Do you think they go what direction?
I think the 49ers screwed this up. I do. I think this is a team built to win right now. Great job with Christian McCaffrey. I think they should have never went away from Jimmy G. And I know he's got the injury history. Like, I get that. But meaning, like, they should have never went after and given up the assets that they gave up for Trey Lance. Because I don't think a quarterback is the end-all, be-all in Kyle Shanahan's system. I don't think it is. I don't think it's that. It's not like Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes where it all goes on them. Like, this is a run first, a play action. And Kyle Shanahan, I think, is one of the best play callers in the league with the play action stuff, to the motion, to the jet sweeps, like all that stuff, right? And so, like, I don't think you need a Joe Burrow type quarterback, which they went to try to get after. So I think they screwed that up 2 years ago when they took Trey Lance. And didn't Brock Purdy just show you, like, and Jimmy G just showed you that an average NFL quarterback can take this team really far. And so I think if you're them, you go with Purdy and maybe you look at Jimmy G again. I don't know, but the problem is like what Chad said, like you put so much into Trey Lance now.
How can you go away? That's my thought. How can you go away from
like that? I mean, that's two number ones. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I believe that was. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, how do you go away from that? But I don't know. I just think they screwed that up 2 years ago, and that's going to affect them here moving forward. I think they should continue to do what they're doing with this team, which is build around your defensive line, continue to add offensive or assets around your offensive line, and build there. And then, not put so much and invest so much into the quarterback position, because a lot of it is play action pass, and Kyle Shanahan's so good with the crosses, with the crossers, deep crossers, shallow mesh type concepts. He's so good with that stuff that you don't need a Joe Burrow type quarterback to win with him. And so I don't know what they're going to do. That's a long surgery now, to rely on a guy who's already average arm strength and Purdy, right? Doesn't have a cannon or anything, but that's a long time to go with. So I imagine you just go forward with the two rookies, right? Or not the two rookies, but Lance and Purdy, and you just kind of go forward and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think that the Brady idea I had earlier, Brady going to either San Francisco or Las Vegas, seems more remote now for San Francisco, because I started to think about the game that they lost to Philadelphia. There's no real deep threat because there doesn't need to be one, right? You mentioned those shallow crosses, the mesh routes. That's where they get all of their big play action, at least from down the field. They don't really go deep. Brady likes to push the ball. We'll see. It's going to be an interesting offseason for the 49ers. One thing is for sure, though, that Kyle Shanahan, he can fucking coach. I mean, that guy is a really good coach, and it's unfortunate that it didn't feel like a more fair fight once Purdy was completely limited and couldn't even play. Matt, we'll talk to you next Tuesday here on the program. Thanks for being such a good sport. Appreciate your takes as always. Great having you on. Our good buddy Mike Schmidt will be in tomorrow, so be sure to tune in to us there. Eagle Pride. And by the way, go Eagles.
You bet. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Go Eagles.
Now more than ever, if you're looking to buy or sell your first home or perhaps an investment property, you need a full-time dedicated real estate agent who is up to date on all the latest trends and analysis and is ready to give you the kind of service that you deserve. That's why the official real estate agent and the official real estate partner of the Sports Carnival is Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate. Whether you're looking to buy or sell your first home, or perhaps you are a seasoned investor, Call the official real estate agent partner of the Sports Carnival, Kyle Cable of One Trust Real Estate.
Hello, this is Professor Fission for Nuke and Nuke Light, the world's first nuclear beer. Brewed and nuked in 1956 and recently found in Warehouse 14. How's it still fresh, you may ask? Well, thanks to our friends Cesium-137, Stromium-90, and Plutonium-239, these beers will stay fresh for another 90 years. Not only does Nuke and Nuke Light have 10 times the kick, but you're sure to be a hit at the party because it helps your urine glow in the dark.
Nuke and Nuke Light. Pick up a case today before it melts through your grocer's floor. And Duluth Care. Yummy.
Back to the action live from the Trauma Center studios. This is the Sports Carnival. Remember, honesty may be the best policy, but insanity is the best defense. Now here's your host, Dave Carney.
I like it. I like it. Well, maybe we're insane. Maybe we're just pulling back the covers on something that's really been underreported, Chad. This morning's poll question at the Sports Carney on our Twitter feed, as well as our Facebook group page, is asking you if you think the NFL is rigged. No way, maybe a little, or yes, totally rigged. Chad, starting to get more votes in here on our Twitter feed. 53% of respondents still say yes, totally rigged. 29.4% say maybe a little, and 17.6% still saying no way. Our Facebook group page, 62% of those that have checked in say that there is maybe a little bit of rigging that goes on. 26% say it is totally rigged, and only 12% say no way. Again, Matt Janus, UWL football coach, joined us, and he said when he first jumped on the program, yeah, maybe a little bit. Now, partly that was just a joke because he was talking about the teams he hates being in the Super Bowl. But, Chad, I think that there is an open conversation here. I don't think that what you're talking about, the ways in which you're talking about the NFL being scripted, is that far off of base. I really don't. And I don't know to what degree this starts to be coordinated, but I have a feeling that the limited number of people in rooms, like with owners and even GMs, 32 owners, 32 GMs, that's only 64 people. It doesn't take, a million people to make something like this happen. And as a matter of fact, the fewer people that are involved in certain kinds of narrative building, the better, right? Like the fewer that you have, the better. It's kind of like the moon landing. You've got people watching something in Houston from a place in Florida, talking to somebody in 1969 from the moon, right? Like back and forth. We can't figure out T-Mobile cell connection now, and we drop calls, but shit, we had that stuff. I mean, it was so easy. It was just so easy. It was a weekend vacation spot. We went up all the time.
Well, I would say never be afraid to question everything around you at all times. There's nothing wrong with that. And as a matter of fact, the first sign of there being a problem is when somebody admonishes you for even asking a question. Asking questions doesn't hurt anything. Obviously, we can't prove anything. This is all subjective. And it's from our point of view as we see these games, as we watch them every week, and we see certain things happen. But there is, outside influences that you can look to. There are people that have been in the league. Again, I mentioned one, Larry Johnson. There's the Jerry Rice thing. There are people that have mentioned that there is at times seems like, or they believe there's manipulation that goes on there. And I don't think that that's that far-fetched that happens. Again, some people will take this and go, you think everything's scripted. Well, no, I'm not saying every single play, every single game. It doesn't work that way. It's worked within an outline, right? Is probably kind of, it's kind of like a Christopher Guest movie. Okay, you know the direction it's going, but you don't know exactly everything that's going to happen because each player has their part to play. That could be part of this. I don't think it's all flat out 100% scripted, like they know every single team, every single game, and every single score. I don't think it works that way. But I do think that there is narrative building that goes on. Again, that's why I love that. Going back to winning time, clearly Kareem was the MVP, and they knew that they needed a new face for the NBA, and so they made Magic Johnson MVP. And a lot of people would say, well, that's not that big of a deal. Well, yes and no. I guess it depends on how you look at it. If you're Kareem, you're like, what the busted my ass. I was kicking everyone's ass, and I got hurt. I should have been MVP. But he went along with it because he understood the impact of that. And clearly, that was a smart move on their part. Let's be honest. It worked out well for them. Having Magic Johnson as your face, as the guy. And then right after that, obviously he was in every commercial. He got Converse contract, and they understood that if they pitted him against Larry Bird, you got black versus white, you got East versus West, you got flash versus blue collar, carry your bucket, your lunch bucket to work kind of guy. I mean, it was a perfect scenario, perfect situation, and they knew how to mold that.
They sure did, and smartly played there by David Stern and the NBA at the time, who seized an opportunity, right? Like, so oftentimes we think of things as being completely scripted when it's actually an opportunity being seized, right? Like, never let a good disaster go to waste if you're a certain kind of agency. And in this case, never let one of these narratives pass you over. Marengo Mike checking in here, who, by the way, shouted out to Coach Janus for that incredible banquet they had last weekend. And I saw pictures online, guys. It looked fantastic. Said the season outcome is planned well before it begins. Well, one of the things that we love doing with NFL offseason stuff, guys, is what? Looking at the schedule reveal. When the schedule reveal comes out, this is a whole day of conversation, maybe 2 days. We look at who the teams they are already. We know who they'll play, but where they play them, when they play them. That largely determines, in many teams' cases, the fate of their season. Does it not, guys and gals? Doesn't that in some cases determine the fate of the season, who you play, when you play them, and where you play them? Okay, so a home game markedly different than a road game. January game in Lambeau is traditionally a lot harder than a September game in Lambeau. So there are ways in which this stuff is being set up. Look at Maddie from downstairs at the recovery room checking in, said, what's the difference between scripted or rigged? NBA Donahue, for example. Well, that was a great example, Tim Donahue, of an official who, in coordination with several other officials, even though we haven't blasted open the entire NBA's reffing community, in coordination with several other officials, not only gambled on games, because that wasn't the totality of what Donahue was talking about. It was talking about punitive fouls for players, ways in which that they would call games to basically teach lessons to players that they either didn't like, coaches they didn't like.
Isn't that amazing?
There were beefs that existed, and these referees, and because they work in crews, right? You mentioned the whole, mafia thing, right? You've got these guys that work in crews, okay? And the crew is one of the things that gets to determine how successful you are. And that's why some of the times you don't get to see certain crews in certain games, because people have blown back so far and so forcefully on a crew's way of calling a game. You're like, no, fuck these guys. We can't have them in. And then it starts to really detract from the product itself. So what's the difference? I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe that's tomorrow's poll question, Matt.
And this correlates to something else. Think about the drug world, right? And drug bosses and stuff like that. We've had a drug problem in this world for quite a while, and it will never go away. Why? Because it's never intended to go away. So what do you do every once in a while to make sure that everybody thinks that you're trying to make it go away? You take down one of the bad guys, right? And you make it public. That's what they did with Donahue. They take him down. Looks like, hey, yeah, no, they got that all cleaned up. Everything's fine.
You betcha.
So if this narrative, if this thing is, and I don't really follow social media, so I didn't know this was trending. If this continues to trend, watch for the NFL to do something about it. And there'll be a fall guy. They'll take one guy down and see, we're working on it. We're cleaning it up. Everything's cool. Look the other way. And most people will go along with that.
Well, this is one of the other reasons I think that when we go back to the Brady deflated ball situation, which is such a non-story, because like all quarterbacks get to basically choose the pressure of their football. Like mostly all quarterbacks get to do that. But why was that such a story, Chad? Because the Patriots had already been caught and found guilty of cheating on at least one occasion, of taping a Jets practice and using that information. So we already had, as sort of a collective football community, a reason to go after the NFL, or at least a team or a player, because we're like, aha, they are rigging this, or they are scripting this. Say what you want about Major League Baseball, and Barry Bonds could be the worst guy ever and should never get into the Hall of Fame. Do you think that if, in fact, Barry was doing the roids, which it surely appears that he was, but do you think, in fact, if he was doing that, that was his actual idea, that was something that just came to Barry? Like, you know what? I've had a Hall of Fame career. I see nothing changing in the sport around me. Like, these pitchers are surely not throwing with velocity that they have never thrown with before. And that guy who was an 86-mile-an-hour fastball pitcher is now pitching me 93 high and inside. Nothing to see here. If, in fact, that did happen, Barry Bonds was just like every other unwitting actor, Chad, in many of these certain kind of sport scenarios. They're going along because they have to in order to keep that paycheck going. You talked about politicians keeping their jobs. These fucking guys want to keep their jobs too. And you do what you have to in order to keep up. That's another thing we don't like to talk about. Baseball's purity. They were feeding methamphetamine to these fuckers coming out of World War II. Thanks, Ted Williams. maybe that's a reason that you never won MVP, because they knew that you were putting everybody up on speed. I don't know. Bob Ibeck told us a story once that he had to tie the shoe for an unnamed Cubs player because he was just too jittery. He couldn't do it. So, rigged, scripted. I think there's a little bit to play with all of this. Listen, we got to go. BetUS.com. Sign up, use promo code Carnival. Get 125% free play money on deposit. Kyle Cable, One Trust Real Estate. You're my dude. House closes tomorrow. Sold my house in 2 days. Of course, the Recovery Room, home of the Trauma Center Studios. Had a great time at bingo last night. Bar opens at 11. Daily specials. Going to be a fun day. It's cold as shit, so make your way inside to the Recovery Room. Thanks again to Sean O'Neill, the O'Neill Law Firm, Chad, and Joe's Helping Hands Landscape. And you guys are awesome. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning, Chad. Who knows what'll be trending? You won't know, but I'll tell you when we do the Sports Carnival tomorrow at 8. See you, bud.